Chapter 11, The Whole Tooth. Piano lessons were a splendid idea, except that every Wednesday after school, when I could have been doing something really useful, like taking a bath or vacuuming my room or sharing my sticks and toys with Annabelle, I was supposed to go to Miss Emily's house, alone, without Lucy, without Annabelle, and worst of all, without my firecracker man gear or PDK. I might as well have been completely naked. Now, Miss Emily was no ordinary piano teacher. She lived at the very end of the street where the trees hang low and the grass grows tall and the shadows stretch like inky tentacles across the road. And her house looks like the face that sags sadly to the right. Go straight to Miss Emily's, my mom said. She's expecting you. Don't stop anywhere. I might not have had a problem going to Miss Emily's. That is, if we lived in a normal town, but we do not. A lot of famous people live here. And when you're famous, you don't get buried like a regular person under a stone that has your name and a telephone number on it. You have to stay in your house to give tours. The way to know where a famous dead person lives is to look for the sign on their front yard that says it's their house. For example, at the other end of the street, away from the end where Miss Emily lives, there's a big white house that says, "The House of Ralph Waldo Emerson." Mr. Emerson was famous for writing essays, which is to say he got famous for doing a lot of English homework. Mr. Emerson died a long time ago, but he still lives in that house. On Thursday, he sweeps his walk. It's very creepy. But his is not the only house that's like that. There's the Orchard House, home of the Alcotts, where Louisa May Alcott leads tours and shows where she used to write stories at a small desk. I've taken the tour with my family. She is definitely a dead author still in her house. "Calm down," my mom said when we were in the Orchard House. "She's an actress dressed up as an author." I don't think so. It wasn't a show at all. It was for real. You could just tell that she had always lived in that house. And her next-door neighbor, Nathaniel Hawthorne, who was also famous for writing stories, is another dead author still in his house. He has a sign outside that says, "Wayside." We didn't make it over there after touring Orchard House that day on account of I was scared so stiff I had to be carried home. So, in a normal town, I would not have a problem going to Miss Emily's. But this town is not normal. And Miss Emily's house is not normal. There is a sign on her front lawn. So halfway there, I stopped dead in my tracks. I couldn't bear to get any closer. "Boo!" said a voice. I screamed. It was Jules. It's hard to go anywhere without going past Jules' house, as I mentioned, and Jules was in the bushes out front. "You going to piano lessons?" asked Jules. "Maybe." "Looks like you were headed straight to piano lessons." "Maybe I am, and maybe I'm not," I said. "No one walks this way except to go to piano lessons," said Jules. "I see 'em coming and I see 'em going. Mostly they come. Only the lucky ones ever go." "What do you mean?" "I don't really know," said Jules. "There are only rumors." "What rumors?" Jules looked down the street both ways and then whispered, "You know the witch with the yummy house who fattened the kids?" I nodded. I sure hated that witch who fed Hansel and Gretel to fatten them and then tie them and shove them into the oven. She was the most evil witch in the world, worse than the one who gave Snow White the poisoned apple, on account of she had kept Hansel and Gretel in a cage, which everyone knows could mean years of therapy for them. "Just learn your scales," Jules said, "but don't eat anything if she tries to feed you. You don't like brownies, do you?" "Brownies are my weakness." "Brownies are her specialty," Jules continued. "You're not gonna last very long if you like brownies." I gasped, and then I turned and dashed home. When I arrived in my yard, I was in luck. Annabelle was digging with my sticks, and Lucy was doing yoga ball next to her. Lucy puts a ball on top of her front paws, stretches out in the dog down position, and touches the tip of her nose to the ball. She can hold the pose until the squirrels come home, or until Annabelle is finished digging holes. "Annabelle!" I shouted. "Come with me and bring Lucy too." "Okay," said Annabelle. "Come on, Luce." Annabelle is fantastic. She always comes when I ask, and she never asks questions why until she figured it out, which usually takes a while. "Aren't you supposed to be going to piano lessons?" she asked when we reached Jules's house. Jules was no longer in the bushes. "I heard there were going to be snacks," I said. "Just thought you might want to come along." Annabelle stopped. She put her hands on her hips. She put her left foot out like a hokey pokey, which is her favorite dance. Then she looked at me sideways. "Is that the tooth, Alvin Ho, the whole tooth and nothing but the tooth? So help you God?" she asked. Annabelle tapped her toe and waited for an answer. "Okay, I'm allergic, I finally coughed. "Allergic to piano lessons?" "No, allergic to the piano teacher." "Why?" asked Annabelle, puzzled. "Does she have 3 fingers?" "3 fingers? A piano teacher with 3 fingers is like an airplane flying with 1 wing." "I thought she was just the witch from Hansel and Gretel," I cried. Annabelle gasped. She hated that witch as much as I did. "What are you going to do?" Annabelle wanted to know. "There's only one thing to do," I said. "Capture her and tie her up." "Hooray!" cried Annabelle. She sprang up and down, and then she did her hokey pokey foot again, which was not a good sign. "Then what?" she asked. "Then we'll figure something out," I said. Annabelle shook her head. "Take me home, Alvin Ho," she said. "Take me home right now." "But I need you," I pleaded. "You're good with strangers. They're always nice to you. And they're nicer to me when you're with me. You might be Hansel, but I'm no Gretel," said Annabelle. "I'm Annabelle Ho, and I dig holes, and I don't sit in cages." Then Annabelle clung to the bushes in front of Jules's house like a tick to flesh. I could not pry her free until I had promised to take her home. So I did. I took her home. Maybe it was the gentleman thing to do, but I don't care. I didn't care. She really was no use anyway, all balled up like that. "Don't worry," said Annabelle when she was safely back in our yard and unballed herself. "Just hold your head high and be a gentleman." A gentleman? I needed to be Firecracker Man. But it was too late. I would never find all the pieces of my costume in time. I was already late, and late is not good if you're a gentleman, I think. So I turned and headed back toward the witch's creepy old house. Just as I was passing Jules's house again, something strange ambled out of Miss Emily's house and started coming closer to me. I froze. It got closer and closer, and my mouth opened, but nothing came out. "Mr. Ho!" the figure called. "Are you little Master Ho?" I did not nod. I did not shake. I did not even breathe. I was not Mr. Ho. I was Alvin Ho. Mr. Ho was my dad. And who was Master Ho? "Heavens, child, you look like you've seen a ghost," said the old woman who stopped in front of me. "We all know there are plenty of them around here," she cackled. "It's the only little cackle, but it was a cackle just the same. I'm Miss Emily, and your mother called and said you were on your way home. We were both worried that you had not arrived yet." She was just as I had imagined. She was about 300 years old and a half. She bent like a question mark toward the sidewalk, and she looked exactly like the pictures in the Complete Brothers Grimm Fairy Tales Deluxe Edition. There was no doubt this was the very same witch who had fattened Hansel and Gretel and tried to feed them into the fire. She was the most evil witch in the world, and even worse now for being disguised as the piano teacher. "Come along, sweetie," she said. Sweetie? I put my foot down, just like Annabelle in the hokey pokey way. I was going nowhere. But then I caught a whiff of my Popo's almost scented hand lotion, which is very pleasant. Miss Emily smelled exactly like my Popo. Strangely, my feet began to move, and before I knew it, I was following her like her own shadow. If only Annabelle were with me, she would have helped me resist following my nose, which I have no control over. Soon I was at the place where the trees hang low, and the grass grows tall, and the shadows spill like ink across the yard. We floated past the sign in Miss Emily's yard that I couldn't read because we were moving too fast. Then we went right into the mouth of the house that sagged sadly to the right. Inside it was dark and stormy night. A painting of a young woman sitting at the piano stared at me. An enormous white head of Beethoven with blank eyes scowled angrily out of the corner. A plate of brownies sat obediently on the coffee table, a glass of milk beside it. My eyes moved from the painting to Beethoven to the brownies. Then they stayed on the brownies, which were perfectly dusted with the kind of sugar that looks like fresh fallen snow. My mouth watered. "Would you like a snack before we begin?" Miss Emily read my mind. "I made my very special brownies. Quadruple fudge. They're still warm from the oven." "Oven?" "Oh. Just learn your scales," Jules' voice echoed inside my ears. "But don't eat anything." I stepped back. Then I tripped and fell over the piano bench. "Oh, dear," cackled Miss Emily. It was only a little cackle, but it was a witchy kind of cackle, just the same. I was speechless. I didn't know what to say. If I had known that taking my dad's Johnny Astro would end me up in this trouble, I never would have taken it. "Let me help you up," said Miss Emily. Her bony hand and crooked fingers stretched toward me, closer and closer, until I could see she only had 3 fingers. I can't tell you what the lesson was like after that on account of there was no lesson. I was completely frozen, like a piece of sausage right off the truck.